Well, you can make it. Take a look. The two locations you see listed on your screen in Salt Lake and Provo have the latest drop-off times. You can also file your taxes or request an extension online. We do have a link to that service on our website. Find it at fox13now.com.
The Civilian Review Board of the Salt Lake City Police Department has exonerated the police officers who shot and killed Bernardo Palacios in May. The panel completed its investigation yesterday, less than a week after the district attorney ruled the use of force in the case was justified. Both findings are based on Utah's current laws, which the DA says we should consider changing. Palacios' family argues the shooting was excessive, and they plan to take the case to court.
Today is the deadline for artists to submit designs for a Black Lives Matter mural at the Salt Lake City Hall. These renderings, take a look, show where the city will outline the words Black Lives Matter right off the east steps of the city and county building. 8 artists will be given $600 to fill in the letters. Applications will be accepted until 5 o'clock tonight. A committee will pick the winners tomorrow.
The Salt Lake City Council is looking at an ordinance to regulate e-scooters. The council is taking public comment online through August 11th on proposed regulations. It requires scooter companies to be licensed with the city. There are sidewalk restrictions, and the mayor can limit how many companies can be here. There are also new parking restrictions for the scooters. We'll link you to how you could weigh in at fox13now.com.
The site of the new Utah State Prison will play a very important role in monitoring pollution in Utah's air. An air quality monitoring shed was brought to the new prison site earlier this week to help monitor the pollution near the planned inland port. Now, the inland port project has caused a lot of controversy over the potential environmental impact it could have on native wildlife as well as air pollution. The shed's location was based on weather conditions.
Okay, now Dina Friedman with us. And Dina, it's been hot. It's going to get hotter. I'm not blaming you.
Yeah.
I'm glad I can be warned.
Definitely. And the air quality isn't so great either, as we were just hearing about some of those sensors. We actually have orange level or unhealthy for certain groups, and that's for Salt Lake and Utah County, and then yellow everywhere else. And some of this is our ground level ozone, which really gets going later in the afternoon, and that can be problematic for a lot of people. Currently right now, though, it's just a little bit hazy, and we've had a lot of sunshine and warm temperatures, as Max was just saying. It's 90 in Salt Lake, 93 in Manti, and 102 in St. George. Our satellite image in the afternoon shows that we have not had much development at all as far as any relief from thunderstorms. There's one small cell that's just to the north of Moab there, along just north of I-70 on the edge of the Book Cliffs. Now tonight, the good news is as it gets dark and clear tonight, the temperature does go down into the 60s overnight, so it'll feel really comfortable. And then we're back up into the mid-90s tomorrow for heading for a high temperature of about 95. It just gets a little bit hotter each day going all the way into Sunday. So we'll have all the details and the exact figures coming up.
Well, eviction filings in many cities are expected to resume as funding for extra unemployment money runs out.
As reporter Dan Grossman shows us, it is creating an uncertain future for millions of people.
Skyline sings songs of progress and growth. Dormant windows, however, they foreshadow a reality that could manifest in the not-too-distant future.
I think there's just a lot of fear. I mean, people are really concerned about where they're going to go when that demand is placed on their door.
Zach Newman is an attorney who started up the COVID-19 Eviction Defense Project. At the end of July, CARES funding is set to expire, stopping the $600 extra in weekly unemployment funding. At the same time, several cities across the country will lift their moratoriums on evictions, creating a gloomy future for the more than 20% of renters who struggled to pay their rent in May. It's already been seen in Memphis, where 9,000 eviction cases resumed last month, and Virginia, where 12,000 cases were filed when its moratorium was lifted.
I think you have people who are behind on their rent right now who haven't been able to make full payment. But then I think the bigger source of filings is going to be in early September, when we are definitively out of the CARES Act money window.
In cities like Denver and Seattle, where rent has doubled over the course of the last decade, the problem is only exacerbated. Cities know moratoriums on evictions can only last so long, which is why here in Seattle, city commissioners passed legislation back in May anticipating a spike.
Landlords would be prohibited from using that eviction history as a basis for denying tenancy and denying people a place to live.
The ban would last up to 6 months after the pandemic, helping to prevent homelessness that can spike as well.
It's harder to hold on to your job. It's harder to keep your kids in school. It's harder to maintain a workable level of health. And so what you see usually after an eviction is that folks spend months and months unsuccessfully looking for housing.
The COVID-19 Eviction Defense Project estimates up to 23 million people could be at risk of losing their housing come the end of September. A swan song of sorts, Zach intends to try and prevent.
Americans need rent relief now.
In Seattle, I'm Dan Grossman reporting.
Still ahead, healthcare systems have been working together to combat the pandemic. Find out how contact tracing works as a tool to slow the spread of infections. That's coming up in today's Wellness Wednesday.
This is Wellness Wednesday, brought to you in part by Intermountain Healthcare.
Identifying an infected person is just the first step in a much bigger picture and process.
And it's one that's been talked about a lot lately. Here's how it works in today's Wellness Wednesday. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, the term contact tracing has been used a lot, a system not new for the healthcare industry.
It's been around for decades.
Dr. Todd Vento, an infectious disease epidemiologist with Intermountain Healthcare, says contact tracing is a function of the Utah Health Department. But when they needed a little extra help at the start of the pandemic, Intermountain was happy to have professionals step in.
We have an obligation as being, good stewards and citizens in our community to support those efforts.
Ali Caius, a speech pathologist by degree, was one of the Intermountain employees who was reassigned to the new role.
It was an opportunity for me to still get to use my clinical skills and still get to help people who are going through something difficult.
She was on the front line to put the pieces of a puzzle together, starting with an infected person.
A person becomes a contact when they have been within 6 feet of distance for at least 15 minutes or more with someone who has been tested positive for COVID-19. So then the contact tracer's job is to call those contacts.
And Ali says making those phone calls came as a surprise most times to the people on the other end.
And that can be scary for people. That can bring about a lot of questions. What should I do? How can I keep my family safe? What about going back to work?
Along with informing contacts of potential exposure, contact tracers provide important information about symptoms and how to quarantine. Dr. Vento stressing that informing people of exposure, as well as safeguard measures, is what can ultimately curb the pandemic.
Our jobs as healthcare providers and public health officers is to make sure we continue to explain why it's important.
Yeah, vital role there. A potential coronavirus vaccine is showing promise in early human trials. The biotech company Moderna and the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, they've been working on a vaccine in a 45-person study. Researchers say the vaccine induced an immune response against the virus in all of the study participants. The next phase of testing will start later this month and include 30,000 participants, a whole lot more people. That trial is expected to be completed by October.
Listen to this, really interesting stuff. The global population could reach its peak by 2064. A study funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation says the world's population could peak at 9.7 billion by 2064. Now that's about 40 years earlier than the United Nations projection. They said 2100, and they guessed the population would peak at 10.9 billion. But according to this paper, trends in female education and access to contraception may result in a decline of fertility and slower population growth.
That is interesting, those estimates. All right, take a look. A new wildfire is burning. Harriman Unified Fire says this right now is burning on 5 to 7 acres near Bacchus Highway near 128th South. Look at all that smoke in the air right now. Right in the middle of the screen, you can see where that smoke originates and then just billows out. We have been told no structures right now are threatened at this time, though Unified Fire says This fire is moving very, very quickly. Of course, all hands on deck when dealing with these wildfires that have started throughout the state. We've seen a number of them today as well as yesterday.
Boy, it looks from a distance, and of course we're not the experts, but it looks like if it continues uphill, which fires do, that's likely better news, but winds would sure play a factor.
Yeah, and we do have winds increasing in the next 24 to 48 hours. So it's relatively calm right now, but that will be changing. The Oquirrh Mountain camera just shows some haze around, so we can definitely see that on the west side of Salt Lake. But for the most part today, it's just been sunny, and the Old Mill camera showing that smoky Harriman fire there in the back. 90 degrees right now. So northwest winds at 10. Gusts a little higher than that, but it's going to get a lot windier probably starting tomorrow afternoon. Our visible picture just shows we've got some cloud development, especially over our highest elevations, and now an increase in moisture in southern Utah. And underneath some of this, we're starting to see a little bit of thunderstorm activity, but nothing too impressive right now. No widespread rain, especially in the forecast. We've got one thunderstorm now just to north of Moab, just on the edge of the Book Cliffs here. And so we kind of zoom in on a little bit of that. And then there's a little bit more just over by Capitol Reef and Fish Lake. So there's some thunderstorm activity going up here. So if you are going to be out and about, especially tomorrow, keep an eye to the sky, especially across central Utah and southern Utah at the highest elevations. If you're trying to get out and cool off, there will be an increase in thunderstorm chances tomorrow. 80 in Park City now, 90 in Salt Lake, 88 in Lehigh. So it's been pretty warm today, but averages in the lower 90s. It's 99 in Green River, 98 in Moab, and 102 in St. George. Last 7 days, we've kind of been all over the place. We were really hot, and then it cooled down a little bit. We got a little bit of relief yesterday and today, and now our temperatures are going back up, up, up. And it's been mostly clear throughout the day, which is kind of good news going into tonight because we still have a chance to see a comet if you have binoculars tonight or a telescope. If you can recognize the constellation just after sunset, the Big Dipper. That one's pretty familiar to a lot of people if you look just kind of underneath it on the northwest horizon. So you'll have to kind of get somewhere where the mountains aren't obscuring you, which is very difficult if you live in our state, but there could be some places where you're going to be able to see this, and especially if you're up high, like on the Bountiful Bench and looking down, you may be able to see something from up there. So Comet Neowise will be able to see that tonight. That's going to be pretty exciting. Did you know it's 64 million miles away, and we won't pass it again for 6,800 years. Wow, space is cool. All right, back to planet Earth. We have high pressure around and just really hot conditions. So temperatures are going to crank up starting tomorrow. 64 degrees in Salt Lake right now for tonight's overnight low, 60 in Vernal and 60 in Cedar City, 71 in St. George. So the mornings are still really pleasant, and then it'll be very warm again in the afternoon. 95 in Salt Lake, 97 for Provo, and up to 103 again in St. George. You're going to stay a lot, very, very warm, a lot of heat, temperatures above 100 degrees for the foreseeable future. And in northern Utah, we finally pulled the trigger, folks. We put the 100 on the map on Saturday. H-O-T, everybody's favorite three-letter word in July. So very hot and very dry weather continues.
Make it seem so positive and good there.
Oh, you know what? My favorite phrase in the whole newscast, space is cool. Thanks, Dina. That was great. Fox 13 News, live at 5, is just minutes away.
We have a lot coming up in the next news hour.
Of course, we are following two new wildfires, one in Utah County that's forcing people to evacuate their homes, that other one in Harriman. We'll have the latest live from the Polk Canyon fire near Eagle Mountain.
And some people are questioning whether or not they have a good reason for not wearing a face mask. A medical professional addresses some of the most prominent myths surrounding the issue.
And before texting, your great-great-grandparents were already communicating electronically across vast distances. After the break, we'll take you to the basement and show you how they did it.
The Utah Divisions of Art and History have a combined total of 1.8 million items in storage. And where do you put all those extra items? Of course, in a basement. Yeah, these happen to be in the old Rio Grande train station in Salt Lake City.
I have only 1.7 million items in my garage.
All stashed away.
Yeah, well, it's off limits to the public, but Fox 13's Todd Tanner is showing us a different item from the collection every day. Todd.
Remember from famous movies, the deet, 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 deet that goes on right here.
What is this tiny tool that revolutionized America?
We like to think of this as the earliest form of texting. This is a telegraph relay.
Chances are you've heard of the Transcontinental Railroad and the big event at Promontory Point, Utah, when East and West rails connected in 1869. But before that, the Transcontinental Telegraph Line was completed in downtown Salt Lake City in 1861.
So you have long presses and short presses, and those correspond to letters.
One of the inventors of the telegraph, Samuel Morse, invented a code.
It is quite a language of its own and took dedicated telegraph operators to understand and transport messages.
This particular telegraph relay device was used by Katherine Nutter, who lived on a ranch east of Price.
This actually became a very important piece within Carbon County because other people needed to come and send messages, and so Katherine was there to handle that.
Think of Katherine the next time you text, from the comfort of wherever you happen to be. Todd Tanner, Fox 13 News, Utah.